Hello everyone, welcome to the Odometry Attribution Webinar Series, a playbook for winning the marketing performance measurement game. Today's episode is webinar number 3, and we're going to focus on putting attribution to work, clarity, insights, and action. Today's webinar is being recorded. Everyone, I believe, is placed on mute. At the end of the session, we should have some time to answer some questions. So if there's a specific question you'd like me to address, go ahead and enter it into the chat box as part of GoToWebinar. So let's get started. First, a little bit about me. My name is Casey Carey. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Odometry. I've been at Odometry about 9 months. I've spent most of my career in the passionate pursuit of helping marketers do better marketing, whether that's through technology, data, or services, specifically focused on providing capabilities for marketers to drive greater performance from each of their investments. And excited to be here at Odometry and some of the things we're doing, and wanted to share with you some insights around how we look at marketing attribution and how you can take advantage of it for your business. First, a word from our sponsor, Odometry. We power more intelligent marketing, and we do that by providing advanced marketing attribution and optimization solutions. Our customers represent 75 plus brands and their agency partners, and we're primarily focused on verticals that have direct response or conversion activities that they can bring into the attribution models, verticals such as auto, telecom, technology, travel, leisure, financial services, insurance, and retail. So let's get started. This is the third in a series of 4 webinars that we're doing. All the previous 2 webinars are posted on the website, and you can see replays of those. But webinar number 1 was focused on setting your strategic direction, really thinking about what it is you want to achieve with an attribution initiative, what your key KPIs are, what data you have available, and ultimately what kind of business results you would expect from it. The second webinar was focused on building trust in the data. So looking at all the sources of data, how you collect that data, challenges and issues with bringing all that data together, and really making sure you have all the data available to answer the specific business questions that you expect from your attribution initiative. Today's session will actually combine clarity and action, and we'll take a look at specifically approaches to attribution models that drive clarity and the types of actions you can expect to get from that improved clarity. So jumping into today's agenda, I'm really going to talk through 4 things, and then we'll go into Q&A. First is looking through kind of different types of attribution models and some discussion about what you should consider when you're looking at implementing an attribution model. Looking at performance across channels, so really this is where a cross-channel attribution model gets exciting. It'll provide insights that you've never had before, but also then taking advantage of that data and analyzing performance within channels and looking for opportunities there to improve performance. And then finally, leveraging optimization and operationalizing the results, really putting this data to work to drive ultimate better business outcomes. So first, let's talk about evaluating attribution models. This is probably an area that I think a lot of people spend time talking about. Somebody will put in a blog post saying last click is dead, and there will be about 500 comments. And really, it's a philosophical or conceptual debate about what's good, what's bad, and why my opinion should matter. I mean, let's really talk about attribution in very simple levels. It's really the practice of determining the role of each marketing touch in informing and influencing the customer journey to a desired business outcome. If you think about it, attribution really is the currency of marketing performance. It's that one notion, that consistent measure, if you will, on how we're going to determine what is success and what is not. So it becomes very important in the organization that we have kind of belief, trust, and consensus around our approach to attribution. A little bit of a, I'd say, bold statement by someone who represents a company that provides attribution solutions, but I believe this wholeheartedly. Accurate attribution is an oxymoron. Kind of reference back to the statistician Box, I believe, who said that all models are wrong, some are more useful. And I believe that's very true when you're looking at attribution. If your team or your vendor is telling you they have a true view of performance, or they have a perfect attribution model, you should run away. It's really a matter of finding out what's right for your business and getting to a point that's better than maybe some of the other more limited approaches. So let's take a look at each one of those options. Most common are single event attribution models. I would expect that most people on the webinar are very familiar with this and understand it. Predominantly last click. You'll see stats. There's usually a survey about every quarter from somebody who went out and measured this, and will come back and say somewhere between 40 and 60% of the marketers surveyed are still using last click. Part of the reason is a lot of the tools that are currently implementing attribution, web analytics tools, last click's the default, and it's also been kind of the default approach for a decade now. So, it's a well-ingrained status quo. Anybody who says last click is dead probably should go read those studies, because it's actually alive and well. Now, whether we should be using it or not, that's a different conversation. Other kind of alternative models, first event. We use first event here. We have a very complex B2B sales model, and ultimately I'm measuring performance on what was the original source of the lead or the account, because there will be dozens of hundreds, if not touches, that are marketing driven and sales driven throughout the life cycle of that lead. So really interested in driving net new leads into the business as part of that overall pipeline. So first event for somebody like us actually works quite well. The default model in Google Analytics is actually last ad event, and this is their belief that often a direct nav or a bookmark drives kind of the last touch, if you will, for an action. So they're actually looking back one event to a paid event, primarily paid search in a lot of scenarios, and giving credit for that. Definitely some value in kind of looking at it that way. One of the things I would think about, particularly for a last click model, where it's appropriate, is if you have a business that's very transaction focused. I know a lot of merchants that don't have brands, they just sell products, and their ultimate goal is kind of be the last one in when somebody's looking for something and wants to buy it. So they're highly focused on that last click model. A lot of people will tell you that they've compared last click to first event or other models, and that last click, that there's not much difference from their last click. One of the things I would consider is you are what you measure. If you've optimized your business on a last click performance, you may find that other models really don't show you much difference, because your creative, your channels, and the way you're executing is actually consistent with how you're measuring it, and that's on a last click basis. So some things to think about if you're currently using or implementing a single event attribution model. One of the challenges with single event models is they ignore much, if not most, of the marketing touches. If you think about kind of your marketing and the path to conversion for your customers, more often than not, they're going to be touched by multiple marketing activities. Here's kind of a representative sample, and this data varies greatly depending on your business and your vertical and your marketing mix. But one way to think about it is how many of my journeys are multi-touch, and that is there was more than one marketing event along that journey within the same channel. So maybe a couple paid searches in that search. Or in that journey. Then thinking about how many are actually multi-channel, and that is not only were there possibly multiple touches within a channel, but there was actually multiple touches across channels. And as you would expect, if you kind of open up your attribution window and you start measuring this and looking at all the events that precede a conversion, particularly if you add display impressions, email impressions, and other impression data as part of that window, and start looking at all those marketing touches, what you will see is that typically, not surprisingly, paid search and affiliates tend to be more single touch and multi-touch in nature, with getting kind of lift and support from upper funnel and mid-funnel media. However, you've got all these other kind of upper funnel and mid-funnel media which are supporting the other channels. So this is actually the interplay across the channels, whether that's video, paid social ads on Facebook, direct mail, or whatever. So you can tell if, just even looking at this sample set of data, if you were basing your attribution and your performance measurement on a single touch model, you're going to miss a lot of the insights in terms of how your other marketing activities are supporting that ultimate outcome. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's talk about multi-touch models. And there's various versions and various names for these, but it's really kind of the answer to if single touch is missing a lot of my marketing events, let me add a bunch of touches in my overall model. They're pretty easy to implement. Google Analytics allows you to do this pretty straightforward. Most of the web analytics tools, Omniture, IBM Core Metrics allows you to do this. Even some of the, I would say, kind of, more basic attribution solutions like Convertro make this very easy. Typical models tend to be time decay. The notion behind time decay is there's a frequency aspect to the impact of marketing. So the closer I get to the conversion, the more credit that marketing event gets. For those who really can't decide what's more important or what's not and just want to be equal, there's an even model. And basically we're going to give credit to every marketing touch along the route and divide it up that way. And then there's a custom approach, and typically these will be called position-based or custom. They typically follow a U-shaped model, and that comes from the belief that kind of your initial marketing touches get people's awareness and start creating interest around what you have to offer. Some of the marketing activities after that are more kind of promoters or assisters, if you will. And then ultimately there's one or two touches towards the end that ultimately help drive the conversion. So these U-shaped models tend to try and represent those thoughts. Best suited for more complex but low volume businesses. So if you don't have a lot of media touches or a lot of conversion events, a custom or a time decay model may be the right answer for your business in terms of trying to get a better approximation of the impact of your marketing touches over a single event model. One of the challenges with kind of even looking at last click versus position based is in this particular example, which I pulled off the Portnet's blog, great blog post around kind of varying models and the impacts of them. You can see here that comparing last click to a position based model, affiliate lost $7.8 million in credit, direct lost $6 million. Kind of conceptually that makes sense. If people are using direct nav as a navigational search, they were going to buy anyway. It's more, it just happened to be there at the last event. Yeah, I could see shifting that credit. A little puzzled by the affiliate data, and that I guess you could argue that people were going to buy anyway, and they decided to go look for a coupon or a discount or some other sort of incentive once they had got to the site, clicked through on the affiliate link, and ultimately made that the purchase. So there may be some shifting there. Frankly, a lot of cases where we've looked at this data, I haven't seen that significant of a shift away from affiliate, but the data is the data. As you can see, email, organic search, and paid search all gained in terms of moving to a position-based model. Probably, like paid search and organic specifically, a shift from direct, right? So typical sequences, paid search, direct conversion. Now we're looking at paid search and giving it more credit than the direct itself. So, just kind of a comparison. I think the challenge is, as you look at this, is simply the rules are arbitrary in a lot of cases. It reminds me of a Seinfeld episode where Kramer was pretending to be movie phone, and George was pushing the buttons, and Kramer was unable to tell which buttons he was pushing, and he finally just said, well, why don't you tell me what movie you would like to see? I think the rules-based attribution models are much like that. You know, why don't you just tell me what credits you want to give to each of the marketing? So it is somewhat arbitrary. Obviously, it's based in kind of your understanding of the business and maybe some data that you've looked at, but ultimately you're setting the rules somewhat arbitrary. So there is some concern or limitations around that. So really, kind of the option if you know, you have the volume and the complexity of your business and you want to move past either a single event model or a multi-event rules-based model, is to move more to a data-driven model. So let's talk about a couple choices there. There's really kind of two common approaches. One is a multiple regression approach, and I won't pretend to be a statistician or an expert on models, so I do know a little bit about them. Kind of the advantages around multiple regression, we all understand them, you know, and we kind of have, I guess, confidence in what they offer and some of the restrictions or limitations on them. But in general, a regression model is going to predict the contribution of each touch. So it's going to look at all the data that it has in its observation window. It's going to look at the conversion events, and it's going to try and pull apart each of those activities and determine what its contribution was to the ultimate outcome. It's very well suited for what I consider kind of be periodic model updates. So a lot of companies will use multiple regression models to determine overall contribution of a channel, and then they'll take those percentages and enter them into a rules-based custom model, if you will. Not a bad approach. You know, it's using data to get to a much better answer for your rules, and if you do it you know, kind of frequent enough and bring that data into the model, it should drastically improve your overall performance. Another approach is an algorithmic approach, and this is the approach we take here at Odometry, but it's a little bit different in that we're actually counting all the events, if you will, as we see all the possible events, and really determining through mathematics what is driving the ultimate conversions. So I'll walk you through some more details around that. This approach is very well suited for a much more dynamic approach in that you can update the data daily. You're basically updating the counts and recalculating, so it gives you a much more dynamic approach to dealing with a lot of complex data on a very rapid basis. One of the challenges with the predictive modeling approach that we've seen, and kind of how we decided not to go down that route, is dealing with event sequencing. And here's an example. I love the AT&T It's Not Complicated ad, so I thought this was a great example. You could have different sequences, but we have the same ad event within each of those sequences. And those two sequences could actually have very different outcomes in terms of conversion rates. A predictive model has challenges in seeing kind of the impact of sequence on that specific ad event and predicting the impact of that ad event overall in its contribution to conversion rates. It even gets a little bit more complicated when you try and do that at a more granular level, whether it's channel, campaign site, placement, or creative. As I said, at Odometry, we take an algorithmic approach. So we kind of use this simple catchphrase, data-driven A/B testing. It's not, you know, kind of true A/B testing, but that's kind of how it works. So if you think about it, the journey to a conversion is comprised of hundreds of thousands, if not tens of millions, of possible combinations of ad events. And it includes both converting and non-converting paths. So there's, you know, 97% of those events actually aren't converting. But that data is interesting in terms of determining what's influencing the ultimate outcome and what's not. So what we do is we actually look at all the possible combinations of ad events as they occur, as we're collecting that data. And we look for a very similar sequence where one of the pieces is actually missing in that exact same sequence. So In this example I've shown here, the first display ad is not complicated. The square ad is not in the second sequence, it's in the first sequence, and the conversion rates are very similar. So, in very kind of simple conceptual terms, we would conclude that that particular ad event has very little bearing on the outcome of this particular sequence. Not overall, but in this particular sequence. Conversely, if I was to find a sequence that had that ad event in it, but didn't have, wasn't succeeded by an email, and saw a very different conversion rate of 2.5%, I could conclude that that email actually has significant impact and bearing on the ultimate outcome of this sequence. So you can kind of understand how we're looking through all the possible combinations that we see coming in and really measuring the performance of each of those combinations and comparing them. Now, conceptually, it's pretty simple. In reality, it's much more complicated. As you can imagine, with that many possible combinations, there's data sparsity issues. You have to deal with kind of the notion of inherent bias and kind of solve for that. And that one audience or one population maybe actually see a certain set of ads and be more inclined to respond to those, like Facebook ads, than those who aren't following the site or part of the brand and seeing the same ad someplace else. So there's a lot of magic and science that goes into making this work and making it as accurate as possible. But conceptually, it's pretty straightforward. So now let's talk about, so we've talked about attribution models and some of the various approaches. At the end of the day, I think people think about attribution as kind of being this end-all approach. And if you think about it in very simple terms, it's literally how much credit am I going to give to each channel, right? So it's dividing up the revenue across my channels and saying paid search gets 37%. Which is important, and we think about it in kind of those simplistic terms, but if you peel back the layers a little bit, it's much more than that. And so I kind of use this phrase, attribution is a drill bit, it's a tool. Ultimately, what you're looking for is something bigger than search gets 37%. You're actually interested in understanding how each aspect of your marketing is performing both within and across channels, and what opportunities do you have to actually change that. So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. If we think about a typical marketing performance management solution, and I showed this, I believe, on the previous webinar, we've got all of our media, whether it's paid or owned or earned, but a lot of different touch points, and those touch points are typically coming across multiple devices to users who belong to an audience. We may also have some CRM data on each of those users as well, at least for the ones that we recognize. And that audience is going to perform, transactions, at least some percentage of them will, across various sales channels, whether that's websites, call centers, or brick and mortar stores. Ultimately, if you think beyond kind of a drill bit and more about what problem am I trying to solve here, what's my solution look like, it's bringing all this information and data together to really understand my marketing performance across each of these channels, across the devices, across my audiences, and the specific conversion sites. And within each one of those, I want to drill down and understand performance on specific KPIs. I want to understand conversions. I want to look at channels and sub-channels. So you could take something like affiliate and break it into affiliate types, whether it be coupons, loyalty, content, etc., rewards, etc., or search in terms of branded keywords versus product category keywords versus competitive keywords, right? So even down a couple levels within each of those channels. Specific sources, so how does Google AdWords compare to Bing, or how does a site, AOL, compare to Yahoo and Facebook? So what are the sources of that traffic? Campaigns, so I may be running winter white sale campaign, so that's across channels, across media. How is a specific campaign performing? Then getting down to the actual tactics, looking at placements and keywords, etc., and looking at that performance. And then Ultimately looking at creative content formats and segments. So really peeling back all the layers to really understand how my marketing is performing across these channels through the devices against these audiences. So like I said, it's much more than I need a drill bit. Attribution enables all this, but ultimately the outcome is much bigger. So let's talk about kind of the spectrum of actionability from attribution. I mapped it against two-dimensional axis here, kind of bottom left-hand corner, thinking about kind of short-term tactical things. And we'll kind of walk through a couple of these, but things like frequency capping. Are there opportunities across specific sites, whether it be retargeting, display, or video, to actually cap my frequency? Is there within specific channels opportunities to identify overlap and waste that I can take out? If I kind of move tactical but longer term, looking at things like creative sequencing throughout a campaign or budget reallocation within a channel. Very tactical thing I can do that can have a long-term effect, and actually looking at maybe keywords or keyword groups and how I'm spending money within those and what's the shift between those. Moving kind of to the bottom right, short-term strategic, start looking at things such as geographic targeting, segments, and really kind of pruning my performers and investing more in my better performers. And then kind of longer term strategic, looking at budget reallocation across channels, looking at activities I can do to minimize time to conversion, customizing messaging, etc. So let's take a couple examples of cross-channel insights that we can look at. First, at an extremely high level, just kind of looking at conversions, right? So most likely in my attribution solution, I'm going to have multiple conversions that I want to look at and do analysis on and understand. So in this particular example, looking at something like clicking on a branch locator on a site for a retail bank as a conversion event. And looking at this notion of kind of on three dimensions. One is total attributed conversions, and that is kind of based on the data that I can see and using an algorithmic model. Statistically speaking, the branch, I can attribute 72% of the branch locations to the media that we've actually seen. And I think this is an important point in that, you know, kind of simple rules-based models are going to take 100% of the credit whether they deserve it or not. A more data-driven approach is actually should only really be taking credit for what they deserve credit for. So something to keep in mind. And then also understanding how many of these are multi-touch. So for the branch locator, 42% of those were multi-touch within a single channel, and 19% were cross-channel, so multi-channel in nature. So we're really looking at, for each of these conversions, how complex is the path to that conversion, and how much of it can I actually see and attribute my marketing performance to. Kind of flipping that over and looking at it a little bit differently is looking at the conversions by channel. So in this particular case, looking at, I think it's total conversions. Display is actually participating, and that is, you know, having a statistical influence on 66% of the totally attributed conversions, and you can see how that plays out in both multi-touch and multi-channel conversions as well. So really being able to look at the contribution, you know, at the channel, sub-channel, et cetera, levels in achieving these conversions. And then really looking at channel overlap. So this is always a big question that people would like to get insights to, and that is, you know, how do channels basically perform by themselves, but then how do they interplay and perform together? So kind of looking at specific channels, the interaction between them, and the overlap between them. So getting those insights are very important. This is one of my favorites views, is really looking at lift. So actually measuring lift between channels. In this particular case, looking at unassisted paid search, visitor conversion rate at 33%. Search preceded by a display impression results in about a 40% lift in performance of search. You know, a lot of times we're organized and measured in silos by channel, and really having the insights into the interplay and kind of lift that can be provided between channels provides a huge opportunity to kind of lift all boats, if you will, in terms of marketing performance. Cross-channel performance. So really kind of looking at, specifically creating a common KPI or measure, whether it's eCPA or contribution margin or some other metric, is kind of getting that apples to apples comparison of channels and aspects of channels in terms of their performance on an attributed basis. For me personally, love to have that apples to apples comparison across those channels. So even though each channel has its own unique metrics they're measuring, it's nice to know kind of comparatively how each channel is contributing to the ultimate outcome. Versus view, this always comes up, particularly against last click. So being able to compare kind of my current model to a previous model. You have to be a little careful with this. I've seen situations where people are comparing 4 or 5 models, and kind of back to at least a lot of the views are somewhat arbitrary. Really, you want to have kind of one version or agreed to version of the truth. And it's nice, I think, to have a comparison against your previous model so that you can kind of understand what the difference is. But at some point, there's a little bit of a leap of faith to say, okay, this is going to be our basis of measurement. We all agree. And, you can't continually debate one's better or worse than the other. But it is kind of a nice insight to have, particularly against the last click model, because quite often your ad server or your paid search vendor is going to be showing you results on a last click basis. So it's nice to kind of have that point of reference. Conversion paths, so really looking at here kind of what are your top converting paths. So you can think back to the examples of the marketing sequences. There's a lot of combinations of converting paths. So having a report that can show me what is my top 100 paths, what is my bottom 100 paths, what's the number of converted visitors, what's the revenue that path is contributing, and really starting to get insights into what are the predominant paths that your visitors and buyers are taking, and then start thinking about ways to optimize that path or get people on that path sooner or get them through that path quicker. How can I leverage sequencing of media, messaging across channels, etc., to actually make that a better outcome. And then overall performance analysis, and this is back to having a common metric and really starting to understand specifically which aspects of my marketing are performing on that common metric basis. So in this case, using eCPA and very easily being able to look at each aspect of my marketing, and obviously up and to the right, red, is some opportunities for improvement. Lower and to the left, in this case, there's only a couple, but those are possible areas of additional investment if there's kind of marginal returns in each of those available. And then bringing in audience data. This is, to me, kind of an interesting aspect. I mean, it's nice to be able to answer the questions around the specific marketing activities, but when you overlay information about who it is those marketing activities are either performing or not performing against, it provides another dimension and insights around that. So we've partnered with a handful of third-party data providers like Datalogix and bringing that segment data in so that you can look at actually attributed performance across channels by creative, by segment. And you start seeing some very interesting things there, whether it's geographic insights for somebody like a travel and leisure company, or it's demographic and lifestyle insights for maybe somebody like financial services or an e-tailer. So definitely interesting data that you can bring in as part of your overall marketing performance management solution. So let's talk a little bit about specific insights within channels. Clearly, for the most part, each of your channels has their own analytics and metrics, right? Email has theirs, search has theirs, affiliate has theirs, your ad server has theirs. So One of the things that you have to keep in mind as you do this is now that you're measuring your performance in this central place using a different attribution model than maybe each channel is using, is kind of understanding and reconciling the difference between that and how do you take action within the channels based on this more comprehensive integrated view of performance. So one of the things particularly that we see is really understanding how channels and specific aspects of channels perform on the funnel stage. So we really break it into kind of 3 buckets, and people use different names for each of these, but the notion of an introducer. So it acts as that top of funnel initial introducer to the offering. Some media obviously is more effective as an introducer, whether it's display or video or maybe some of the social stuff, and even to some degree paid search. But really looking at each aspect of your performance in terms of its role as an introducer to the brand. Kind of the stuff in the middle is the promoter. So which marketing channels, creative campaigns are acting as promoters, so they're assisting along the way. They're getting attributed credit and driving the outcome, but they're those touches between being introduced and ultimately closing. And then which channels, campaigns, creatives, etc., are acting as closers and really helping ultimately drive those conversion events. And when you look at these reports, it's very interesting in that you will see, for an example, within display, a specific example where some sites were very endemic to the category and were very high performers in terms of introducing the brand. So people were going to those sites not ready to purchase, but really focused on kind of discovering, understanding, looking at options, etc. Whereas similar or different sites, same creative, running on different sites, performed much stronger as closers. And those where somebody already had made a decision, they were at a later stage, were exposed to a marketing touch, and ultimately resulted in conversion events. So even the same channel can act across the funnel. Could be a function of the audience that's available on that channel, the specific placement. It could be a function of the creative or the keyword, etc. So really having those insights into how each aspect of your marketing is performing across that funnel is very powerful and definitely very interesting. One of the things we always have great conversations around is more click-based channels like paid search, affiliate, shopping engines. And the term I like to use is it shuffles the deck. So within my paid search platform, I see some stack ranking of AdWord keyword groups, campaigns, and keywords themselves, and the performance of each of those. And really managing that portfolio of terms to probably some return on ad spend metric. Once you basically look at the performance of those keywords on a fully attributed basis, the deck gets shuffled. Words that may have been performing some of your strongest terms aren't as much so now, and terms that may have been performing well below your threshold are now performing above it. And really the shift occurs in a couple areas. One is obviously having insights into top of the funnel and mid-funnel terms acting as introducers and promoters when you were probably measuring them on a closure basis. So a lot of times we'll see underinvestment in top of funnel, mid-funnel terms. So great opportunity for growth. Kind of conversely, possibly overinvestment in bottom of the funnel terms. And realistically speaking, we all have kind of our key terms, our strategic high CPA terms that we're going to bid for and pay for, kind of no matter what the price. But what a fully attributed basis provides you is really understanding of not only what the true cost of those terms are, but actually how those terms are supported by, interact with, and depend on not only other search terms, but other media, whether it be display, email, etc. So really no longer looking at the performance of them kind of in a silo, but looking at it all together and really understanding how that comes together. By doing so, like I said, you're going to see opportunities to actually get rid of some waste, maybe back off on some stuff, but definitely other opportunities to up your investments, drive down your cost per, or kind of drive up your key metrics such as revenue or conversions. Display specifically has some very interesting opportunities when you look at it on a full funnel basis. One is really kind of understanding reach, not only total volume of reach, but exclusive reach as well. So one of the things we've found specifically, whether it's video advertising, display advertising, or paid social, you know, performing well at top mid-funnel, but really being managed to kind of an eCPA or conversion basis without really understanding its overall role in terms of interplay and interaction with the other channels. Once you kind of are able to conclude that as part of your overall performance measurement and are confident with the contribution of display as part of your overall marketing, you can then focus to really understanding, do I want to grow my reach as part of display? How important is unique reach as part of my overall strategy? There may be even an opportunity, and we've seen this, to where overlap between sites and or networks is actually a good thing. It actually creates greater lift. So exclusive reach isn't necessarily the ultimate goal, but really understanding the performance of those. Another key aspect of this is bringing viewability into the model. So not considering advertisements that were not viewable as part of your overall attribution. Really just kind of chewing up the data and really looking at the data that's going to make an impact on the ultimate outcome. And the last piece I'd say around display is, and this is true for retargeting as well, is identifying frequency capping opportunities. We'll find generally when you look at display's performance on a fully attributed basis, a lot of our customers are overexposing. You hit diminishing returns on those. They're wasted impressions. Like I said, very true in a lot of cases for retargeting. You can only buy so many retargeting. You only have you have a limited audience in which you can target retargeting at, so we tend to do more of it because the audience itself is limited. When you really look at that on a diminishing returns basis, there's huge opportunities there to eliminate some wasted impressions. So let's talk quickly about optimization and operationalizing the data. Need to wrap up here. Sorry, running a little bit over. So at a high level, attribution tells you what you've done, kind of what you got for the dollars you spent. And you have insights in terms of some things you can do different. Ultimately, I'd like to use science and math to tell me, where should I spend my next dollar? So bringing in this notion of predictive optimization. So really putting constraints on a model, whether it be an eCPA, a budget amount, max spend in a channel, and really having the model tell you what the optimal mix is. Not only the optimal spend, but then the optimal mix across each of the channels. So for me as a marketer, this is where I get excited. It's great to have all the insights and kind of being able to do some things different that drive results, but then ultimately give me this strategic input in terms of, if I had another $1 million, where do I spend that money to get the best return? And here's an example of optimizing on conversions and shifting the budget between channels. So in this particular scenario, the starting budget is being decreased in display and search. It's being increased in affiliate, etc. So really using a model to tell me what's my optimal mix across channels. And then really drilling down into that, and actually within each channel, what are the opportunities to move budget between tactics, whether it be between sites or keyword groups or affiliates. How do I move that budget within that channel to actually optimize the ultimate outcome of that channel? And then finally, pushing attribution results out to both programmatic and DMPs. Here's an example of one of our clients that's using two metrics. So they're using an attributed look-ahead performance metric, which is a 7-day look-ahead, so kind of forecasting what they think the keyword performance is going to be, as well as the actual results from yesterday. So they're basically have created two conversion events in Marin that are the attributed values of performance for each keyword. Those two values are now being used by the Marin bid optimization engine as the dependent variable on which to optimize bids. So over time, as you think about it, you've moved away from a last click or rules-based model. You're now using fully attributed results in either an RTB or a paid search platform for their optimization algorithms to take action on. We typically see, depending on, it depends on your business, but I think for a lot of companies, there's a 3 to 5% improvement in search performance just by connecting fully attributed results over to one of these programmatic platforms. Likewise for a DMP, so not only having the insights on audiences and how those perform across channels, but actually feeding that performance data back to a DMP, such as Blue Kai or somebody like that, to help inform kind of the targeting and the programs that are being run out of that data management platform. So much like a paid search platform, you can do the same on a DMP or an RTB real-time bidding platform for display. So key takeaways, select an attribution approach based on your business needs. Run away from anybody tells you there's only one answer to attribution, because honestly it depends. It depends on your business, your complexity, what data you have available, and ultimately, what makes the most sense for you. Obviously, if there's an opportunity to use a data-driven approach or a more accurate approach, you should definitely look into that. The upside and the potential return is great, but can also say that it's not for everybody. Particularly, if you're using a modeled approach, you're going to need a certain amount of marketing events and a certain amount of conversions to make the models work. For somebody like us, who's a small B2B marketer, we're using a rules-based model. Leverage the insights to drive improved performance. So really looking both across channels and within channels. So moving beyond kind of attribution as telling me what the percentage is, and really setting up a system and a solution that allows you to peel back all those layers and really understand on a fully attributed basis what's working, what's not working, and where's the opportunities to really move from activity to value-based measurement. So with that, I think we're out of time. So what I will do is I'll do a follow-up blog post, and I'll take some of the key questions that were submitted and address those in the blog post. So look for that. We'll post it at the same time that we post the replay of the webinar as well as the slides. Webinar number 4, driving results. So we'll bring to the webinar some stories from the front line. So very specific details around data, what we found, what was some of the areas for improvement, and ultimately what kind of business results those changes made. So it's Tuesday, February 25th, and would love to have you attend that. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you again for attending, and we'll look forward to the next webinar. Take care.